We fill our foyer with them every year. If you're a guest with us this morning, you may not know what in the world all those shoe boxes were doing out there. Well, now you know. They're on the way. They're overseas and around the world, and a special blessing that we engage in each year. And again, you saw the date on the opportunities, and I think Eric mentioned dessert. I think I was counting today, 3 times or 4? What a wonderful celebration of faith that evening is. If you've never participated, please plan on being here. If you have an outstanding chili recipe, you have permission to bring it that night. If you have a dessert recipe, I'd like to particularly invite you to participate that evening, because at church dinners, you'll always find me. I've had so many green bean casseroles, I don't need any more. But special desserts, I'm all about it. The message series we're into right now is titled Prayers for Sinners and Saints, Embracing the Presence of God. And particularly kind of holding it all together is just kind of the subtitle of prayers during the journey, because it's not prayer at one point or another point. It's prayer in the course of our lives. And this morning we focus again in the second and the third, in the second part of this third emphasis in the fall, which is we began it in the spring, about prayer as working out alone. That may seem like a strange way to go at it, but the idea of being alone is not common in our society. So this is just the emphasis for this morning. A case in point happened just this past summer in June 2012. There was an article in the New York Times that apparently struck a nerve for a lot of people. It was the article received over 800 comments and was often quoted and retweeted. The following capture the essence of what the author analyzed as the busy trap. If you live in America in the 21st century, you've probably had to listen to a lot of people tell you how busy they are. They're not just busy, they are crazy busy, right? I am so busy you can't even imagine. And it's kind of a compliment in life. It's a good problem to have, we'll often say. I'm busy. Oh, that's a good problem. Beats the alternative, doesn't it? You've heard that kind of phrase before. Better than the opposite. Busyness serves as kind of a hedge against emptiness. Because if I am busy, I must matter. Because I'm doing things. I'm engaged. I'm participating along the way. If you're so busy, so booked, so hooked on the demands of every hour of the day of your life, I'm wondering with you this morning if that's the good ambition that is driving you to be busy, or is there something else missing in your life? Busyness, I believe, serves as kind of a hedge against emptiness. That is that I don't really have things together, so I'm just going to overcompensate by being so involved in the things of life. Aloneness, I would like to use 2 words this morning back and forth, so let me just caution you about them. One word would be aloneness. And I don't mean that to be the same as lonely, right? You ever heard the phrase, lonely in a crowded room? People, I've been there, lonely in a crowded room. So this is aloneness, not loneliness. And the other word I'd like to work with for a minute, and as we understand the pattern that Jesus sets out for us, is solitariness. Now, many people play solitaire, the card game, by themselves. But it's not a card game transaction, but it is an idea that in solitariness, as in aloneness, there is spiritual value, particularly when it comes to prayer. This is where Christ followers turn when they want to understand more about prayer. That is, they look at the life of Jesus, they watch what he says, they watch what he does, they watch how he interacts with people, and then we take from those models of his life examples for our own lives. So as you read in the New Testament, for example, in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, and John, you're trying to pay attention. What is Jesus saying? What is Jesus doing? How is Jesus interacting with people? And what kind of relationship, this morning particularly, does Jesus have with the followers? I admit that this may not hold interest for everybody. I mean, you may be sitting here saying, okay, Andy, you didn't zing me in the first 3 seconds here. You're done. It's over for the morning. But I would tell you that this would be the kind of... So I tried to categorize the people who this kind of emphasis would not matter to. For those who have prayer all figured out, this morning won't help you at all. So if you've got prayer all figured out, just kind of, fantasize on dessert or something. Just make it special and make it chocolate would be my request. For those to whom prayer is a lesser part of life, if you've never prayed a prayer of desperation, If you've never had that kind of urgency in your heart or passionate cry out to God, then this morning probably, so I'm building this understanding in my own life and preparing to understand how I might share these thoughts with you. Who would this not matter to? So for those who have prayer all figured out, no problems. For those to whom prayer is a lesser part of life, never having prayed in a crisis. For anyone whose prayers are always answered, as if the courts of heaven couldn't wait for you to speak. So it's from your mouth to God's ear. And it always works out that way. If you say to this mountain, be moved, and the mountain moves, then just kind of, then this probably won't help you at all. I just caution you that there's a few of us who don't quite get all those things. And for those of us who still struggle, even after decades of following the Christ, with prayer in its most essence and basic form, this morning I think you'll see the encouragement of the model of Christ's behavior and the concepts that he teaches us and provides for us in our lives that we try to put together. So the text then, and I'd like to break it down in a couple ways. You've seen perhaps that the primary passage is from Mark's Gospel in chapter 6, but there's a little bit of setup here we ought to work on. Matthew and Mark and John each have a little section on this episode if you want to look it up later. The episode begins with this transitional word in Matthew, then. Now you may be thinking, okay, Andy, you're going to get super technical here and you're going to lose me, but I promise I won't, I promise. Matthew begins this with then, which means that there's something before this episode. Just as you read the Bible, pay attention to those words of transitions. Matthew begins this little understanding with a phrase, then. Mark begins it with the word immediately. And John begins it with, when evening came. It's a little more clear in Mark's gospel because when we present ourselves and try to understand what's going on, it's good to pay attention to the context. I'm standing over here and thinking about one of my friends who does a little bit of triage often at a walk-in clinic. It's pretty nice to know, isn't it, when you walk into a walk-in clinic that somebody's really going to listen to you as if your life mattered because something preceded you walking in the walk-in clinic. In that same way, we benefit by paying attention to the context of the Bible just before the episode that we're going to study. All right. It was the feeding of the 5,000 and some other times of tumult in the life of Jesus. Now, Mark is especially interesting because he uses this word immediately many times in his gospel. In fact, I just took the time to count them up. 11 times in Mark's gospel, 4 times before this account, and 3 times in this chapter, Mark says, immediately, immediately, immediately. Now, if you start talking that way, is something up? Come on, now that was not a trick question. Yes, something's up. So when you're looking at Mark and trying to understand what's going on here in the life of Jesus, if I want to soak in as much biblical knowledge and teaching from the presence of Christ about what he says, what he does, how he interacts with people, and how he interacts with God, then I start paying attention when I start noticing words at that level. There's another piece of information that you should know before we delve too much further into this. The word that we commonly translate into English by the word prayer has at least 8 words in the New Testament and perhaps 9 that we translate with one English word, prayer. Does that tell you that something else could be going on at a greater level than just kind of hits the eye? You ever heard the phrase, you lost something in the translation? There you go. Now, you're going to see one of those episodes. And again, my task this morning, as I conceive it, is not to present you with a word study of each of those 8 or 9, but I do want to alert you as readers of the English Bible, there's something else going on in this passage that you might just be aware is pretty significant. So now you've seen Mark's writing style, immediately, immediately, immediately. Now you know that there's more about prayer here than just first meets the eye. And on the other hand, I wanted to also do this. I just want to push this a little bit. Here's what we're not going to work on. I thought this would kind of clear the decks for action. We're not going to work on the opposition that Jesus is encountering. So if you're working on giving you opposition in your life, we're not going to work on that today. going to work on that in this episode. We're not going to work on the encounters that Jesus has with being misunderstood, because, of course, none of us are ever misunderstood in life, so why would that be important to us? We're not going to talk about the public encounters that Jesus has had and will have with his family, because, of course, none of us ever have any problems with our family, right? So we don't need to pray particularly about that, but another day. Finally, I'd say to you, I think we're ready to look at the passage, and you say, oh, good, Andy, I thought you'd never get there. Well, I'm here, so come go with me. Here's the simple passage. After leaving them, Jesus, went up on a mountainside to pray. Now, you know that there's a lot now around this whole little scene in one short biblical phrase. After leaving them, he went up on a mountainside to pray. Now, if Jesus said, I'm paying attention to what he says, what he does, how he interacts with people, and how he interacts with God, I really want to try to understand this, so I start to ask some simple questions. I mean, I just kind of am a simple guy in my heart, I believe, and so I ask simple questions. So I'd ask this question, do I have to go to this mountain in order to pray? I mean, I just asked that question, I mean, it seems like it's a fair question. Or is this a place of commanded pilgrimage? If I really want to be heard in my prayers, do I need to go to this mountain and to this place and make my prayers? I could ask that question, of course, by watching then the behavior of the disciples, right? Do the disciples ever go back to this mountain and this place to pray their special prayers? Well, as a matter of fact, we find no record of it. What about Paul, that great apostle of the church who God will send out around the Mediterranean basin to plant churches in each of the major cities of commerce and influence throughout the region? Will Paul ever make a journey to this mountain, to this place, to pray some special prayer? Zero is the answer. We never find a return announcement to this. But I would want to know more about Jesus himself. Maybe that's where the heart of this really rests. I'd suggest to you what Jesus is doing is he's seeking time. He's seeking aloneness. He's seeking solitariness with the Father. So my conclusion might be something like this. If you're in the midst of stressful time, if challenging hours are on you, what does the model of the life of Jesus teach us? How does it really present itself to us? If you're feeling overwhelmed, I mean, look around this room. There's enough people that some people could be here this morning with an overwhelming sense of, just pick the human conditions, health issues, family crisis, business struggles, family finances. You just begin to consider the opportunities for stress. So we're looking at the life of Jesus and seeing that he is living in an immediate time. There's no, put it off till tomorrow. It's an immediate time. It's a pressing time. Mark's been telling us that. And the model of Jesus is when we're feeling overwhelmed. By the way, has God given you some good counselors in your life? Good friends. I hope you have some people that you could call at midnight. I have a few of those in my life, and they're precious to me. And I've called them at midnight, and they've called me. I hope that in the struggle for consistency in your life, that when you seek out a good and competent physician to use some of the pharmacology that God has built into this world to help in the struggle of stress and overcoming, that you find a competent physician. This is my kind of street way of saying it. You want somebody to give you enough to help you, but not turn you into a zombie. Does that make sense to you? I remember one of my very closest family members telling me, when cancer was running rampant in his life and overwhelming him, he looked at me and he said, Andy, I believe in prayer, but I want you to know, without this little white pill, I'd have lost my mind. See, I'm one of the people who believes that God has built into this world the pharmacology that properly administered can help us. Good counselors, good physician care, and Jesus models for us the other. The presence of Almighty God in aloneness, in solitariness. There's nothing replaces that. That's it. So again, if you don't have life issues, nothing troubling you, everybody you know is a person who walks closely with you, and they just cheer you on and encourage you every day. I'm fond of saying this one. If you don't have any VDP in your life, you're a blessed person. VDPs are very draining people. When they walk away, you say, oh, thanks be to God, that's over. Because they just pulls it and just sucks it out of you, like going down a drain, and you're just exhausted when it's done. And you know that you were trying to be strong, but you're truly exhausted. If you don't have any of those people in your life, if you never encounter any opposition to your values, that is, to the strengths and the truths of your life, if you don't find yourself ever misunderstood, everybody always understands what you say, and there's never been any misunderstanding in your life. I just say that I'm just trying to control my laughter, because it does happen to us, doesn't it? If you never have any power encounters with your family, that kind of solitariness. Look, I turn to my friends, and their assets and values in my life are irreplaceable. I watch my friends turn to the pharmacology that God has built into the world, and I treasure the great and competent physicians among us who help them. None of those are replaced by that aloneness and solitariness with the Father. Here's the observations that I'd make. If you want to note them on the back of your worship bulletin, there's space on the back. There's actually 4. And it's about solitary prayer. And it's just in a simple little passage, isn't it? Jesus goes out and prays in a solitary place. Here are 4 truths then about practicing solitary prayer. The first is an intentionality of leaving others. If you read this little passage, you'll see right away that Jesus intentionally leaves other people. He doesn't really make a big deal of it, but he leaves them. I think whatever it is in your purpose in your heart, whether you say in the midst of a crowded room, or in the quietness of the day, or the chaos of the day, in the rush of a hospital corridor, in the rush of a family Thanksgiving dinner, when all around you are inflamed over something, to just go stand in a corner, to say, I'm just going to walk outside for a moment. Seeking solitariness with the Father is an intentional act that doesn't just stumble into your life. That's the model that Jesus presents to us in how he handles stress. Purposely seeking isolation with the Father. See, I want to just say it's more than just intentional leaving. It's also, I don't want other distractions. Are you distracted in life? By what? By how much noise? By the cell phones going off? I mean, it's an unusual Sunday morning thus far. I should have paid somebody $5 to have their phone ring right now. But it is. I mean, life is distracting, right? And it's unbelievable. The level of distractions just keep going on. But you see that this is intentional, that I will be quiet. I'm going to seek isolation from all the things of life. That means I'm turning off the background music, the background noise, the ringers, the wingers, all those kinds of dingers that go off in my life. I think I just made up something new. The ringers, the wingers, and the dingers. I'm going to do that again. That's pretty good. Purposefully seeking isolation with the Father is the model of Jesus. So I hope you have those first 2. The intentionality of leaving others, purposefully seeking isolation with the Father. And the third would be, it need not be a big production. It need not be a big production like, well, you know, I need to have it on a special day of the week, or it needs to be a special day of the month. I need to have this, I need to get all, I need to wash my hair. I need to get all set up. I need to polish my shoes. It need not be this big production. At the end of a very busy and exhausting day when Jesus is dealing with people, he doesn't say, well, let me go wash my robes first. He does not, as a good Jewish man, become ceremonially clean, washing his hands or in this special way. He just barges in and drops onto his knees before the Father. It need not be a big production. And the fourth is this: it need not be a well-known place. You don't have to travel somewhere. You don't have to go to some special place in your mind. It need not be some piece of special geography in your life. I hope you have some of those. If you ever want to find my special piece of geography, I can tell you exactly where it is in Pinellas County, Florida. And I could take you there, and I'd be thrilled if somebody wants a field trip any day of the week. You call me, I'll go. Because in that special place is just so much of my family history and the meaning of my life. But Jesus doesn't go to a special place. Evidently, they're staying near a mountain. So Jesus walks off by himself and finds this special place in the mountain. So those four, I believe, are the secrets of solitary prayer, which is a leaving prayer, and I encourage you to seek it. It's not too late for you to find such a place. Now here's the challenge and here's the difficulty. I want to and put it in this context. Life is not a do-it-yourself project. I don't know if you saw or are familiar with the phrase echo or esse homo. It's a phrase that comes to us from the King James translation of the Bible. It's actually a phrase that is translated as behold the man. It has to do with the appearance of Jesus in the last hours of his life. This particular photo, I'm going to show you here in just a moment, was completed by Elias Garcia Martinez in the 1930s. In August of 2012, an 80-year-old church member decided that the picture of Christ as behold the man was fading. You see, the picture was painted right on the wall of the church building. And when it was painted on the wall, it wasn't doing so well, because the interaction of the paint and this old painting now were beginning to show signs of deterioration. So a blessed church member of the congregation decided that she would bring help. And her name is, I tell you what, I have the name, but I don't think I'll mention it. Just to be gracious for a moment. But she decided that she would take this picture, which had been done by a very well-recognized artist, and she would fix it. And her reasoning was this. You know, around our church, in the buildings particularly, we kind of take care of it ourselves. Kind of sound like New Hope, doesn't it? You know, we kind of take care of it ourselves. We don't hire people to do it, and when we can't get to it, it just doesn't get done. So she takes this painting, and it's kind of like she brought some magic markers or something, or maybe a child's watercolor set, or maybe worse, she was even, maybe she thought she was an artist, you know, and she really wasn't. So she took her brushes and her paints and her magic markers and whatever, and she did this to the painting. One of the reviewers of the painting said it this way: the delicate brushstrokes by Elias Garcia Martinez have been buried under a haphazard splattering of paint. The once dignified portrait of Jesus now resembles a crayon sketch of a very hairy monkey in an ill-fitting tunic. What do you think? She didn't do too good, did she? You know, art restoration is not a self-help project. Life is not a self-help project. Might have been better to call for the stroke of the Master's hand. Prayer is the stroke of the Master's hand. Seeking Him in aloneness and solitariness makes all the difference in our lives. Let's pray together. Father, thank you for reminding us that restoring our soul in the midst of crises and struggle, a self-help project, just doesn't cut it. We've tried it on our own, Father. And just when we give things to you, we often try to wrest them back and take control again. So thank you for reminding us in the simplicity of this painting what the results of our endeavors often end up. Give us your blessing, Father. Give us your encouragement and your wisdom. As we seek those times alone with you, would you bless my friends? I pray you bless those who are desperate and crushed by life, perhaps by the poor decisions that they themselves have made. And allow us to be restored individually, Father, and thus as a group of your people, by that same intimate contact that we find our Lord pursuing on that night of great struggle. Grant us those moments of isolation and aloneness with you. Meet us there. Hear the cries of our hearts and our spirits in these prayers we speak during the journey. Bless my friends who are struggling this very morning. Bless them with the comfort. Perhaps they too feel alone in a crowded room. Hear their cries and their prayers, O Lord. Be generous and compassionate. Turn not your face from us, but hear the cries of your people. As we go out this week into this new phase of life, may our hearts and our minds be especially attuned to those who are desperately seeking you. May this not be an understanding that we grasp merely for ourselves and thus become hoarders of this relationship that you welcome us into. But may we be generous in our awareness of how our Lord prayed, that we might too encourage people to find those special moments of quietness with you, without journey to a special mountain, with no designation of a special place, O Lord. Grant us as your ambassadors, as your emissaries, the opportunity to be your witnesses in this new week of life. And all God's people prayed together and said,